Swinburne University of Technology.
I'm here today to talk to Dr Deb Dempsey, who is the Academic Director of Research for one of the schools within the Faculty of Health, Arts and Design for the School of Social Sciences and Arts. And Deb has two hats that she's going to wear in this talk. The first is that she helps students with things to do with research, the postgraduate students and staff. And the second is that she has a very distinguished career in sociology. So Deb, let's start with the first one. You help students. Would you like to talk about how you act in your role as academic research director?
Okay. I guess the role is there for a number of reasons, Josie. Students come to me for help sometimes with supervision issues that they might be having.
So what sort of supervision issue that might a student have, for example?
Well, perhaps there's a difficulty that they have with their supervision and they don't know who to approach to talk about that.
Right.
But I'm also there as a point of contact for anything to do with the administration of higher degree research in the school. For any policies that we want to make, say for instance there are training needs that students have or supervisors have, and just for those sorts of issues really.
And Deb runs a really important on-campus series of training for students that I recommend you go to if you can. Would you like to talk about that a little?
Yeah, of course Swinburne Research have a number of training programs that they run for students throughout the university. But we also have training within the School of Arts, Social Sciences and Humanities. So there's an occasional seminar series that runs throughout the year that is monthly, and it's on topics like writing conference papers, preparing journal articles, those sorts of issues that all higher degree students need to come to grips with. But we also have a dedicated week-long research design and training course where students can work on their thesis topic, turning their topic into a more manageable research question that they can tackle. So the training can, yes, it runs throughout the year, but it also runs in a dedicated week-long program that is usually around mid-year.
So that's fantastic for students not to feel that they're just left out there somewhere,
yeah.
or if they're having some kind of interactive difficulties with their supervisors, they're not left alone with that either.
No, and sometimes it can be really difficult to know, you know, who to talk to about those issues, and you know, other students are not necessarily always the best people to talk to, and maybe you feel a bit uncomfortable about bringing certain things up with your supervisor. So certainly I can be a point of contact for those issues. Also, I mean, another reason that students contact me is if they've got an idea that they'd like to see happen that could in some way support the research culture for students within our school. So an initiative about a seminar or an event or a speaker that they'd like to invite. So I'm always, you know, happy to talk to students about those sorts of initiatives that they might have.
Well, that's really terrific to think it's a two-way street like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we don't always know what students want and we don't always know what they need. And I mean, students in our school are really diverse. Some of them are doing conventional theses, some of them are doing thesis by artefact and exegesis. They're writing on a whole range of topics. They're from a range of different discipline areas. So, you know, we may not always anticipate their needs, and I'm always open to hearing from students about any ideas they've got for how we could support them better.
And the other side of that, of course, is that there are regulations and protocols and rules that, as you say, you work within that area as well, so that you can help the students to know that they have to, for example, submit an ethics if they have a worry about ethics and they aren't sure what to do. There are regulations and rules that you can help them to understand, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, all the rules and regulations can be found on the Swinburne Research intranet, and there's a dedicated area for higher degree research students. But sometimes it can be difficult to know how to find that information, or, you know, what to do with it once you've found it. So yes, and of course another big part of my job is the whole progress review process that all students go through. So every year of your candidature, so year 1, year 2, year 3, You do have to have a progress review panel where you present your work to a panel of academics, and your supervisors are also present. And that's really to keep you on track, and also as a way of supporting you and giving you guidance with your work at each stage, and making sure that you finish your PhD in a timely fashion. You don't want the PhD to take over your life. It's not your life's work. It's really a starting point,
yes.
So the progress review, I think, is a really important way of supporting students, but also making sure that they keep on track with their work.
Well, thanks for that about your job in this research direction area, but you also are, as I said, a very experienced sociologist. So how about a sociology PhD? It probably, I imagine, generally has a pretty formulated way of approach being set on the page. Is that a wrong thought on my part?
Yeah, look, I think sociologists work across all different modes of thesis preparation and design these days. They work with a whole range of different research methods. So, for instance, some sociologists might work with autoethnography. Some will work with more conventional social sciences research methods, such as, interviews, focus groups, surveys. Some write a conventional thesis in which there is a literature review and a number of results chapters. For other students, they thread their literature the whole way through the thesis rather than having a literature review chapter up front. It really depends on what the question is and what sort of design answering the question and presenting the work in its best light warrants.
So would you say there's kind of no traditional model for a sociological PhD, or not?
Well, I mean, a lot of sociology PhDs are based on social research, and a conventional social sciences research approach would be that you have an introduction, you have a literature review, you have a methodology chapter, and then a series of results chapters, a discussion and a conclusion. So very similar to a psychology type of thesis. But depending on the topic, some students can be more experimental. And the PhD by papers is also starting to be a popular thing for sociology students as well, where you decide you're going to publish, say, 3 journal articles where you're the principal author and they're on linked themes that relate to your research question, and that's your thesis. So I don't really think the discipline demands a particular approach, but it's certainly true to say that a lot of sociologists work with the conventional social sciences model of a thesis, which is, introduction, lit review, methods, results, discussion, conclusion.
Okay, and that also often leads in sociology, and I have heard that there is a demand for this, if you're going to be employed, to a book. Is that correct? To a book at the end of the PhD?
Well, it really depends, I think. As you would know, books require a market.
They certainly are, getting harder and harder to do.
Yeah, so if you're going to, certainly, you may be encouraged in your examiner's reports to publish your work as a book, or you may not be, and you may want to do that anyway, and it may lend itself to a book. And there's no reason why you can't publish your work as a book, and many people do. But a social science style thesis also lends itself to publishing the work as a series of papers, a series of journal articles. So people do both, and both of those things are quite acceptable.
Not so very long ago, people who did a PhD did it because they wanted to become an academic. I imagine in the social sciences this has broadened quite a lot within the last couple of decades. Is this how you would see it, that people have other reasons that they want to perhaps get into government or policy or local government or whatever? Would you like to comment about that?
Yeah, I think, a lot of people begin a PhD out of interest, not necessarily because they have an idea that they want to have an academic career at the end of it. Obviously, some people hope to have an academic career, and that's true, but, particularly if you're coming back to the PhD after a long period of absence from study. It may be something you choose to do in later life where you have a particular passion for an area, and then you're going to be working in a completely different field. So I think it really depends, and certainly in my experience, not everyone that starts a PhD does so with the intention of becoming an academic. But I would certainly throw in at that point that no matter what your reason is for coming to do the PhD, it really helps if you don't let it take over your life, and you know, not thinking of it as your life's work that takes 10 years, you know, as the PhD once was, but something that, you know, you've got really 3 years to do. It's a project that happens either 3 years full-time or 6 years part-time, and something that, you know, happens within that time frame.
And once the people who came into the PhD program were almost all coming through a particular stream of entry, would you like to comment on how that's changing? People come from other entry points, and how does that affect their acceptance into a PhD program? Because it's not just a rubber stamp, is it?
No. Well, some people come through the conventional 3-year undergraduate degree and honours program, and honours is still a very popular entry point for the PhD in Australia. And
honours sets up really what you're going to do next, doesn't it? Gives you an idea of the theoretical and the methodological questions and so forth. Is that it enriches you to go to the next step of the journey, packs your bag?
Well, that's actually a really interesting question, because some students choose to do a completely different topic from what they did their honours project on. Some students find that at the end of their 4th year, they've either done that topic or they're a bit fed up with it and they want to go on to something different. For others, they just find it's the beginning of a really strong fascination with a particular area, and they just want to pursue that further. So I think it's quite hard. I mean, but both of those entry points are acceptable, either developing your honours work or using it as a launching pad or a point of departure for something else.
So in honours, you've learned, I guess, those kind of generic skills of the literature review and the theoretical prisms and perspectives, and finding your scholarly voice. Would that be so?
Yeah, it does certainly teach you something about developing a project from scratch, having the intellectual confidence to do that, getting the practice with writing, and as you say, finding a voice with the writing. So it's a pathway, I think, to conducting your own independent research, but it's not as if the PhD necessarily has to follow the project that the honours was on. But, you know, in terms of other entry points, I mean, often people will apply for a PhD after they've worked in other fields for a number of years. They may have done a master's by coursework, or they may have returned to study after many years' absence after working in various industries. So in the community services sector, for instance, where sociologists can often work, people who are interested in sociology can often work. So it really depends on the person, and some people will come in from undergraduate and go straight through, but it's very common in the social sciences, I think, particularly sociology, for students to have had a period of absence from their undergraduate studies before they come back in.
And there is, of course, the Australian Qualifications framework, to which all universities are signatories, which also state that current competencies, things you've developed through your working life, can be taken into account as an entry point, and alternative methods of learning can be taken into account, can't they? So do you get many students who come from that kind of background?
We do, and students who have come from, you know, unconventional backgrounds back into higher degree study, you do need to demonstrate that there's been some sort of preparation in your background for the sort of research that you'll have to undertake at PhD level. There is a concept of honours equivalence, so the component of research that you have undertaken in your work life or in you know, other experiences that you might have has to be considered equivalent to what you would gain from an honours year, which is writing a 15,000 word thesis that you substantially research and design yourself.
Right, well, there's quite a lot to think about, isn't there? And there's also, of course, the university scholarship. Would you like to give some thoughts on how people might get a scholarship?
Okay, well,
because they're very good, aren't they?
well, it's very, very challenging to undertake a PhD project, I think, and complete it in a timely fashion without some form of financial support. I mean, unless you're independently wealthy, which, you know, some people are.
Very few, I imagine.
Very few people. But we do have 2 scholarship rounds at Swinburne, as most universities have. So the end of February round usually, and the one that happens mid-year.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to supply your academic transcripts, your research proposal. You have to have contacted supervisors or people that you would like to supervise you in advance. You also need to have academic referees that you've lined up from either your industry experience or your previous academic study. So get all of that information ready. The details are available on the Swinburne Research website, and you go into a ranking process with the other students that apply. And yes, the ranking process is very rigorous.
And it's highly competitive, isn't it?
It's highly competitive.
There are a limited number of scholarships and not a limited number of applicants.
Absolutely. And look, as someone who's been on the Graduate Studies Committee for our school for quite some time, I can say that, you know, there are always more fabulous projects that we'd love to fund than there are scholarships available.
Yes, yeah.
So it's no reflection on the potential quality of the research if you miss out, but it's certainly worth having a try if you've got, you know, particularly if you've got first class honours results in your academic work.
Well, you've just mentioned a committee, and I think a lot of students don't understand that their applications go to committees, the ethics committee, the research committees. Could you just say a little bit about that it doesn't just get rubber stamped somewhere?
Okay, so the Graduate Studies Committee is a committee that looks at applications for candidature and also applications for scholarship. So we require that students write a 3,000-word proposal of their intended project, and that's to ensure that you know, once they're accepted into the PhD, that they're capable of fulfilling the demands of the PhD and can complete it, you know, within the 3-year time frame that they have. So it's a good way of preparing for what is a really big task, and it's a big step up from honours to write a PhD. It's
a big step up from everywhere. It's very challenging, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very challenging, and
it's a new and significant contribution to knowledge in your field.
That's right, and it's you know, I think it can be really life-changing too, and it takes a toll on your relationships. You have to be very dedicated. You have to be able to commit yourself to a long period of writing, you know, in a solitary fashion. You do have peer support, and you of course have the support of your supervisor and others around you, but basically it's you and your hard intellectual work, and you've got 3 years of that. So in asking for the proposal, we want to be sure that you know, the students that apply can actually go forward and do that. And it's also a good way, apart from marks alone, at assessing the quality of the research.
Fantastic, Deb. Have you got any kind of last words of wisdom to any of our potential candidates or supervisors or examiners or anyone who may be watching this?
Look, I think a really important piece of advice is to not look at the PhD as your life's work. And once upon a time, I guess a PhD was like a capstone project. It was the sort of finishing off. These days, it's very much the entry level to an academic career, but also the way to pursue in depth an area of interest that you have a passion about or that fascinates you. But you know, if you run into difficulties while you're doing the PhD, there is always lots of support available. So I would really encourage students to look around for that support and ask for help if they need it. But certainly think that the PhD was within their capabilities, and not to be put off by the, you know, the fact that it is 3 years of dedicated, potentially daunting work.
Well, thank you so much, Deb. I hope we've all learned more again from this, and that you feel now that you can go forward to thinking you're not alone in this, even though you're eventually alone facing the blank page or the blank computer screen. But there are systems, there are support systems, there are committees. There's a whole lot of thought that goes on behind the scenes, and I think Deb has revealed quite a lot of that to us today. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Josie.
This has been a Swinburne production.